This episode of Let's Talk Mate is brought to you by Novatech. Thank you to Novatech for sponsoring the show and helping to support men's mental health. Hello everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk Mate, Solent Mind's men's mental health chat. And just for this episode, we will be talking a little bit about self-esteem. Obviously, we've already had an episode on body issues, but we'll talk a little bit more of a deep dive on self-esteem, whether that be physical, personality-wise, self-esteem issues when it comes to your own mental health and all that kind of stuff. So before we get into it, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Sam Clark, and I'm the Digital Content Officer for Solent Mind. And just before I introduce my other guests, just like to remind you that if any of the issues that were brought up on this podcast do affect you, Solent Mind are here for you. You can check out the Solent Mind support line. It'll be on the end card as well as in our description, as well as if you're in Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport, Havant or East Hampshire, you can check out the Habour. Or if you're in Southampton, you could check out the Lighthouse. All of that information will be on the end card or will be in the description below. So now let's get into it and introduce my guests. Let's go ahead and start with you, Rob.
Afternoon, my name's Rob. I'm the Peer Recovery Service Manager here in Portsmouth.
Thank you very much again for joining us, Rob, and Dan as well.
Afternoon, my name is Dan Warren Holland. I am the Programme Lead for Employment and Inclusion at Solent Mind.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to, as I said at the topic, we're talking about self-esteem. We're talking a little bit deeper than body issues, but I think an interesting place to start is kind of thinking of what is the first thing that kind of comes to mind for both of you when it comes to self-esteem? Like, where does your mind instantly go when you think, self-esteem issues? What is that to you? What does that come from? Where do these stem from, really? I don't know who wants to start with that.
I think for me, body image does always tie in with self-esteem. So that's something that I do go to in my mind. Because it is something that I've struggled with for most of my life. I don't particularly talk about body image or body confidence a lot, but it's something I struggle with. But also, I think when I think more kind of broadly in terms of self-esteem, I think about things such as work status, income, kind of that place in the world. So for myself personally, I wasn't able to work for a long time because of various health issues, and obviously that meant I didn't have much money. I wasn't able to buy my own property, do various kind of things. So I think that can really, when we're talking about self-esteem, factors like that. So someone's social status, their job, their income, they're gonna maybe their general place in the world as well. If someone feels like they don't have a purpose or sense of direction, I think that can impact on people's self-esteem as well.
And same question to you, Dan. But also, do you think, in terms of those things you talk about, income and worth, and whether you've got a property and all that, do you think that ties a lot more into men's self-esteem than it might do from your experience from talking to people? Does those kind of things maybe tie into men's self-esteem a little bit more than it does women's self-esteem?
So just to kind of go back to the original question first, I agree with Rob. I think body confidence is such a big thing with self-esteem. You can't help it. You can't help it. I put on quite a bit of weight over lockdown, and I've been running, and I've lost most of it now, and I feel great. I'm trying to, in my mind, separate the weight loss and the great feeling from the two, but it's not. I'll be honest, it's not always easy. A lot of the clothes that didn't fit before now fit, and that makes me feel good about it. It's something I'm trying not to get in that trap of losing weight and being slim equals happiness, because I don't really think it does. But I think from the running part of that and the routine and the exercises help a lot more than losing weight, but it's an easy trap to fall into. But it's what you're saying about the kind of things like status and money. I think it does. As a guy, as a bloke, you're kind of expected to be a hunter-gatherer. And even if that's not been put on you by a partner or even by society, it's just historical. It's how you feel. You kind of feel if you can provide, if you can put a roof over your head, if you can afford good food, and like power and electricity these days. That's the next big commodity, isn't it? Like it does give you self-esteem. I think because you don't have to ask for help, and I think these two things are linked. If you can take care of yourself, you don't feel like you have to ask for help and support. I think as time, especially this year goes on, with the things Rob said about status and money and income and these kind of things, these are tools that mean you don't have to ask for help as often, whether that's a food bank or having to ring your gas and electric company, which will happen to a lot of people this year, and say, look, I can't afford this, but I still need electricity. I think that's going to make a lot of men feel low because they feel insecure about, again, what Rob was saying about their place in the world and about their, it's easy as a guy for your place in the world is to provide and to have things and be able to afford food and electricity and gas. So yeah, and if you do struggle to afford those things, then yeah, that's going to have a massive hit on your self-esteem. You're not really going to know what your place is in the world.
And I think that actually is quite a big one. We are looking at the kind of current circumstances we're going, like already hitting us, because the cost of living has already gone up over the start of this year and is going to continue to go up towards the end of this year. And I think that's going to be such a huge part of everyone's, everyone's self-esteem, but if we're talking men specifically here, it does become that point where like you may need to ask for help, whatever that may be, whether it is, the financial help, whether it is calling a thing, or like, obviously we've got some great employment teams and people like that here at Solent Mind who can help with not just the little bits of advice here and there, but also in terms of the mental health support as well. But I think, that might be more likely to come up in discussion for women in the workplace, for example. I know even talking to my mum, that's something that's been discussed in her workplace already, but just between her colleagues, versus I don't know if that would necessarily be discussed in my dad's place of work between colleagues. Just that kind of small difference, and like being able to understand that not everybody is probably in the same position as you, where if you don't talk about it with your colleagues, you'll never really understand other people in the same position as you. And I think that can often almost play into that self-esteem as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially, I've lived in Portsmouth my whole life, and I think that especially as young men and boys in Portsmouth, you're not effectively taught how to open up and ask for help. I think me and Robert probably spoke about this before, and might have spoke about it on here, that when you grow up in a city like Portsmouth, what's like heritage and roots is in Navy and war. Every single school trip you go on from the age of 6 is to do with war, whether that's the Mary Rose, the Victory, the Warrior, the D-Day Museum. Everything you do, everything that is kind of surrounding you is like teaching you that as a guy, as a male, you've got to be able to fight for what's yours and protect and to do all these things, and it's entrenched in your DNA. So yeah, I kind of think, it's hard. I don't really want to speak from a woman's point of view because I don't know it very well, I'll be honest. I don't know it too well, but I think that's but as a male, that's what you're taught, especially in a city like this one, is that it is important to be able to fight and survive, and to be able to do that for other people is something which is ingrained in our culture.
Yeah, even before the cost of living crisis started spiraling, I'd see it many times. I'd be working with clients who were really struggling financially, quite often because they'd be on, they were too unwell to work, so they'd be on disability benefits, and there's a real hesitance to accept help sometimes. If you would mention something along the lines of, I can do a referral to you for a food bank just to kind of take this one little bit of pressure off you, there's that kind of hesitance there. More often with men than women, I would see a hesitance to take that support. And I think especially then a couple of times where the men that I'm offering this support, this kind of resources to, if they then had children or a partner, then that would then just compound that fear of, that hesitance to take that helping hand, because they're meant to be the provider. And that really, that hits. I think I kind of had conversations with a lot of men where that's really hit hard, where they've not been able to provide, and it can have a really damaging impact on people's self-esteem and feeling of self-worth.
And I think it's important to point out at this point as well that as much as like it can be so hard to like reach out for help or make that call or do something to kind of, you almost get yourself into a state where you don't want to do something, so then you don't do anything about it, then it gets worse, and then you're like, oh, why didn't I do something about it when it was 2 months ago and it was a lot easier to do something about it? Or I'll share this kind of moment I had recently where, and it's just a moment I'm quite proud of because it's something that I would never have normally have done for like the last 3 years. But again, with the cost of living coming up, I felt I was already overpaying on my energy bill in terms of my direct debit every month and whatever else. So I made a decision to call up, which, calling a phone call is just a nightmare of its own. But I made a decision to call up my energy provider and say, look, I've been paying this amount into my direct debit every month. It's more than covering what my energy bill is every few months. Can we cut this down, or like now before it gets to the point where it's going to be more and whatever else? And they quite quickly, again, I cancelled my direct debit, so they were quite quick to rectify that for that reason. But they eventually did, and that was something I was really proud of, that I was able to do that. Not just the phone call, but just to reach out for help. Because previously I would have been guilty of just being like, oh, I'll just figure it out. I just won't, I'll find the money somewhere. And that normally becomes because I won't, I'll lose out on something that I want to do for my own health or my own well-being. So I won't go and do this thing that will be really good. I won't go to the football, for example, which would really be good for my well-being, or I won't go out with my mates, which again would have been good for my well-being. I'll instead, rather than make this call, not even rather than pay the bills, rather than make this call to make my bill slightly lighter, I'd rather take a hit on my own well-being. But it's something that, you want, and I'm happy that I reached out and happy that I did that. So I hope that at least people can think about that kind of possibility and think about, you shouldn't, as much as you think, oh yeah, I can live with that, this isn't an essential, your well-being is an essential part of your income. If you can find well-being things to do for a lot cheaper, great. But sometimes spending a little bit of money to get a better for your own well-being is as essential as paying the bills or food or whatever else. And if you can find a way of knocking some of that down to put into your well-being, I do think it's worthwhile, especially when it is just a case of asking for help. It's not something that's completely impossible to navigate, basically.
Yeah, I agree. And that's going to help your self-esteem, isn't it? I mean, the example you just gave there, it is that fear of being seen is less than you want to be seen. But look, I worked in call centres for years. That call centre agent, there's not a chance they put the phone down and say, guess what? Some lad's just called up to make his direct debit smaller. Let's all have a laugh at him. He's on to the next call. They've forgotten about it 10 minutes later because that's what they do all day. But still, in you, it's hard to see that in the time. Like you feel almost embarrassed for calling up, and that does hurt your self-esteem. And you're right. The things that you do that help your well-being will help your confidence and will help your self-esteem, and it's all these little bits is almost like a Lego model where like you put the little bits on and eventually you get a fully fledged person. And if you start taking them little bits out, the whole thing crumbles and falls down a little bit. It's not gonna stand up for much if you've got to remove parts of it just because you don't make a phone call. But I think we've all done it. Yeah. We've all done it. Like if you get short on a credit card 1 month, I mean, I can't take the amount of months I've taken the hit and thought I could call them, or I'll just pay it next month and I'll take the 30 quid charge for doing so. That seems like the right thing to do. Yeah, keep doing that. Yeah.
I think it is that vicious cycle, isn't it? Where you go from like, oh, I should just, and you get to the end of normally it happens to me where like I'm like, oh, I'll take this hit, and I get to the end of the week and I can't afford something. I'm like, well, why didn't I just make that stupid phone call, you idiot, kind of thing? And it really does really get wrapped up in that self-esteem issue and just anything like that. And then you don't want to talk about it with people because the first people question are like, well, why didn't you just do that? I'm like, well, yeah, I know that, but it just wasn't as easy for me in that moment. And it does become like and I think talking about money and talking about how much you can afford and whatever else does become such a hard topic to broach. And I know we've had a whole podcast again on money and debt earlier in the year, but it is such a hard topic to broach, especially as you end up guilting yourself again with like, oh, there's people in worse off positions than me. And like, full disclosure, I'm in a much more privileged position than a lot of other people, but even that doesn't take away from the struggles that I have. And I think that's one thing that everyone kind of needs to get on board with, is like, just because people have it worse than you doesn't make your struggles any less real to you and what you're dealing with in that moment.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's the thing. I'd like to say I'm very lucky. I've got property which I pay a mortgage on. I earn decent money. I don't. It's just me, my wife, my little cat. So my expenses aren't that massive, to be honest. I don't have children to provide for, and this kind of thing. So yeah, I try not to complain about money too much. But like you say, it doesn't mean that I don't have struggles. Sometimes they're there, and you've got to be. But I think as guys, we don't call up our mates and say, you know what, I'm struggling with this bill this month. I don't need to do anything, but can I just tell you how shit it is, please? Is that okay? You don't do it, do you? You don't, and it's not something that we ever do. I'm not even sure how we'll do that, to be honest. I'm not even sure. I've been working in mental health for 12 plus years, and I think I'm pretty savvy when it comes to well-being, but I wouldn't even call one of you guys to say I'm struggling and this is making my self-esteem poor. I'll do what most people do, is front it out and fake it till you make it.
I think kind of linking into that as well, sometimes I've kind of felt pressure. I felt that pressure to say, if, for example, my friends are trying to organise something, or it's a night out, and it's my turn to kind of pay around, or everyone's kind of paying around. Especially, again, not so much nowadays. I'm in a bit of a luckier position now. I'm working. I've been working full time for about 4 years now, and I'm earning a decent wage. But there's also that pressure. I think sometimes an embarrassment to say, yeah, actually, I can't afford this. Or I can't go on this lad's holiday, or I can't go on this night out. And then consequently, again, that leads into a bit of a black hole. That can lead into a bit of a black hole with people's finances, especially at the moment. So, you've got that danger as well of, that embarrassment of actually having to say, no, I can't do this right now, Yeah.
And it comes back to not being as kind to us as we are to other people sometimes. Because if you was on a night out now, one of your mates said, look, I can't afford to buy a round. Someone else said, don't worry, mate, I've got it. And it'll be that. Like, there'll be nothing more said about it, but still, when it's you in that situation, it just feels so much harder.
Yeah, I definitely think it is important, again, having these conversations. And I think it comes back to our last discussion about masculinity and mental health. And, in that same discussion where we talked about last time of explaining to your mates that you're not feeling particularly good about going to the club tonight because you're feeling anxious, have that conversation of like, listen, I don't worry if you also can't afford it, but like, I feel like this would be really good for my well-being at the moment. So if you wouldn't mind, buying me 1 or 2 drinks, and then next month when we go out and I've got a bit more, I'll do the same for you. Again, having that conversation can go such a long way. And again, 9 times out of 10, again, think about it, if it was your mate approaching you with that, 9 times out of 10, unless you were in a financially stuck position, which again, you don't have to do that. But 9 times out of 10, if you are in a position to, you'd go, yeah, of course, we want you out with us, so please do. Like, if that's the only thing that's stopping you from coming out, please, like, I'd love, like, that's what I'll say to my friends a lot of the time. It's like, I'd rather have you out than me save that, couple rounds worth of money. Like, and I think just having that conversation can go such a long way. Again, a lot easier said than done, but I think it really just cut out, just feeling like you can talk to your mates about stuff like that. It would go such a long way.
Yeah, you can. That's the thing, is you can talk to your mates about it. It's not easy, but you can. Most of your mates would be very empathetic to that, and they would want to kind of rally around and help. But that's what friends do. But it comes back to being able to reach out and ask for it and be able to say, "Can I have some help, please?" It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, and that and the impact that has on your self-esteem. Because like you say, as you start to not do things that would help. Do you know, like, I think that can come down to, especially in a cost of living crisis, because it's so important. Money is so important for, you know, it costs money to get a haircut, it costs money to like buy decent face wash, or I'm going to out myself here to buy moisturizer. Yes, I use moisturizer. But all these things, they all cost money. And if you can't afford, it'll be so hard, you know. But again, if one of my mates called me up and said, look, I need some moisturizer and I can't afford it, I'll say, how much is it, mate? You can have it. Or if Rob said, I need my beard trimmed, but I can't afford the barbers this month, but I feel a bit scraggly. So, well, okay, mate, how much is it? It wouldn't be an issue, but I would not go to Rob, I need my haircut, can you lend me some money?
Yeah.
We don't do it, but we don't do it, even though we probably could. And most of our friends would be quite open to that and be quite happy to help if they could afford it, they would be. But it's hard. And I think, especially these days, self-esteem and your finances are so close that they are like, it's so, because everything seems to cost a lot more money than it did a little while ago.
I do think what you said there does play directly into it as well, in terms of like when you can't afford just to sit. And I think this comes from a school thing, because I remember haircuts especially being such a huge thing in school. And I don't know if you would relate to the same thing, but like if someone came in, like I remember I came in, it was ever the rage back in 2012, but the Justin Bieber type haircut. But the way it ended up wearing with me, it looked more like a bowl cut. And that was my nickname.
I shouldn't laugh, but I'm gonna.
That was my nickname for the rest of my years.
Yeah.
I don't matter how many times I got my haircut changed after that. That was it. And like, looking back on it now, I'm like, why did it bother me so much? Because it's so stupid. It wasn't even a bowl cut. It was just slightly straight across the front. That was it. Like, and I did, and like again, like I really just didn't think any. Like now, I'd look at it and go, why did it bother me so much? But you know, as a kid, it does bother you so much. But then you realise there is other things, like even, you know, I just got my back and sides shaved back up again, so it's nice, so I feel nice and fresh and smooth down the sides. But when that's not happening, and it feels less like a haircut and more like just a disaster once the back and sides grow out. And I do get conscious about that, but you can't always afford the 20 quid or whatever it is for a haircut. So and again, like whether it's moisturizer, myself and my nail varnish, whatever it might be that makes you feel that little bit better, and you can't afford it, that does then play into it again. And that is such a huge thing from such a young age as a lad, I think.
Yeah, I think it does. I think you're right, it is. And it's such a trap to get caught in as well. It really is, because if you start to not love yourself enough, if you don't look in the mirror and love what you see, then your self-esteem can drop so quickly. It can, and everything from, and it's all just a domino effect, isn't it? And a lot of it will start with finances and incomes and time and motivation, because time's another currency. It's having the time to go and do these things and it's all hard, it's all pressure.
Yeah, I think the time one's an interesting one, especially for people who are working. And if you haven't got time to go out and do things to make you feel your leisure activities, spending time with your friends, or if you have but you're too tired, again, that's going to start impacting in. And especially if I'm quite lucky, I like my job, but if you've got someone who doesn't like their job, and then they're finding they're too tired or too drained after they finish working to put that time into looking after themselves or kind of finding their purpose outside of work, then that as well is also going to have that kind of, that knock-on impact on, on people's self-esteem and confidence and general well-being.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to, if we talk about what the root of this discussion originally was, about the whole body image side of things, there's such a weird trend on social media now, where it seems to be like everyone's got time for at least a 20-minute workout, and it's just like, do they though? Like, realistically, like, okay, maybe if you break your timings down of the day, but it's never as simple as that. And again, going back to money, if I'm looking at my budgets monthly, I don't think I could afford the gym membership, even if I want, even, I'm not a gym person anyway. That's not how I like to do exercise. But it's not if I can afford a gym membership. It's not as easy as just going to the gym. It's finding the time, it's finding the money, and that then has an often effect to body image as well. And I think, and again, like, I think this is an important thing to discuss on the Men's Mental Health podcast in terms of the potential for body dysmorphia, because I don't think a lot of men think they have it. And it's not just with people who are slightly bigger, like people who are muscular kind of body dysmorphia. Probably in a lot of cases for men, I don't know. I don't know what the stats are for this. So I'm not going to claim this is true to fact, but I'm willing to presume that most body dysmorphia in men probably comes from the more muscular gym people among us, because it does seem like those kind of people just never see actually how fit and healthy they are. They seem to always see that, 4 abs instead of 6 abs, or whatever that little thing might be for them. And I just wondered what you can talk about that body dysmorphia and how many men probably have it compared to those who actually think they have it.
I think a lot of people, if it's tricky, we don't want to go around diagnosing people, of course, but I think there's probably a lot of people out there who definitely suffer with some aspects of it, more, and probably more, like you say, Sam, I think there's probably more people who, if they don't have full-blown body dysmorphia, definitely suffer with more kind of aspects and traits of it than they would care to admit. I mean, it's one of the reasons I wanted to come. I was keen to come on this episode. It's something that I struggle. I don't have a diagnosis of body dysmorphia or anything like that. So I wouldn't like to say I do, because I would maybe worry about devaluing it for some people I know who have actually got that diagnosis. But yeah, I've struggled with my body. I've struggled with confidence around my body image pretty much my whole life. And as you say, I'm fairly in shape. I have a bit of extra weight about me, but people don't tend to look at me and see, an overweight person. So I think, and people are still surprised sometimes when they hear me talk about that, because they don't look at me as someone who would have that. And you're completely right. Trying to find 20 minutes for a workout every day of the week is hard.
Yeah.
I know that, because the amount of times I end up missing my gym workouts or just kind of real workouts at home. But yeah, it's still, and a lot of it as well can be, and again, ingrained from kind of youth and in those formative experiences growing up. So I think with myself, a lot of it kind of stems from kind of hassle I got when I was a teenager. I was kind of very gawky, kind of, I was always tall but very thin, and quite uncoordinated as well, to be honest. So yeah, I think more people, it's still work, maybe still kind of more work needs to be done on getting those honest conversations about the people. And there is always that danger as well, the more, and I know Sam, you're a great advocate for the benefits of social media when it comes to mental health, but there is obviously that danger again with the rise of social media. Everyone's got a Instagram account or a Facebook account. So those are kind of images of the more, if you would like, desirable body shapes. They're just out there, and they're in your face a lot more.
Yeah, I think that is the thing with social media, is you could have been like the fittest person in your town or the fittest person in your friend's circle before, whereas now on social media there's always going to be someone who has that extra ab or has those slightly more toned muscles that you're going for. Or even if you're not talking about muscular, you're talking about, I know personally, I was very, very insecure when I was younger about, again, Rob, you touched on it there, but about how slim I was. And I think that's a very man thing to be insecure about, is how slim you are. But, you'd always have these conversations. Like, I'll be on Tinder, for example. Again, bit of a segue here. I'll be on Tinder and talk about, and someone, I would be like, oh yeah, I'm not muscular or whatever. And the girl would be like, oh no, yeah, but I like a dad's bod. I'm like, well, that's not really what I am either. I'm just kind of the skinny little kid. And like, now I've put on a lot more weight and feel a lot better in myself. But I think it is that, that discussion that often gets missed out is like, yeah, you muscular or you dad bod, but when you're neither of them, or you never really fit into either of those characters, or even what the like attractive version of dad bod is, like it's very similar to like the chunky girl, where there's a attractive version of it which isn't necessarily realistic, and then the more realistic version of it which people would not look down their noses at. So I think that kind of discussion of like, exactly what you said, like there is different insecurities, and not disregarding a man's insecurities because he thinks he's too slim, because that was a problem I had far too often when I was really slim and when I was unhealthily slim at certain points. And I'd try and express it to people and be like, oh, you're skinny, everyone wants to be skinny, everyone wants that, look at those legs that are unhealthily thin, like that everyone wants that. And I think that becomes quite a danger as well, is disregarding something just because someone else deems that to be desirable, then disregarding it as someone else's insecurity.
Yeah, and I think just because you mentioned about dad bod, it does make me giggle that a youngster like yourself being with a dad bod, but just because that's just another thing that I mean, one of the things that I'm aware of that I'm trying to check when I in terms of my own body image is age can also factor into this. So I'm very aware that I'm turning 40 in January, and it scares the willies out of me a little bit, because I don't want to admit I'm getting that old. But I'm part of me is terrified about the whole dad bod thing. Is like, am I going to start getting a lot saggier and all this? I've already had to shave my hair because I've shaved my head because I'm losing my hair. Things like that can also kind of factor in about especially if you're like me, because my phone's obviously mentioned me talking to my friends about shaving my head, so I seem to get so many targeted ads about hair loss remedies, or I'm obviously getting to that age where I'm getting targeted adverts on Facebook for hair dye to kind of cover the grays, and that really can impact. And it sounds silly, but it might sound silly to some, but that's something that I'm finding at the moment is really impacting on my body image. And it's good to be able to laugh about it, because that's partly how I cope. But yeah, it's Rob, it can be a bit relentless at times.
Rob, are you at that age where you get a Newman advert yet?
Not yet.
Are you not? That must just be. Oh, I feel great. I feel about a year younger than you. That makes me feel good now. Since I turned 35, every social media I go on, even YouTube now, it's like go on Newman to help you keep it up. I'm all right, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm getting to that age now, right? It's good to know. But I didn't even worry about that before, and now I'm being reminded every day that I'm at that age where I'm getting older. But it does. I think it does play, especially like being male. That's always going to play into your like sense of security and your that kind of thing. But things like again on social media, I think it's expectation as well, especially when you see this kind of gym life happening. And then you see guys like The Rock, who's in his 50s, putting pictures out like he does. And you just think, yeah, we're never going to look like that. Not a million years of that ever going to happen. I didn't know where to start. But I think that kind of, that does perpetuate that, like some males feel that they're not enough. I'm quite introverted, but I'm a pretty confident person. I've been with my wife for 18 years this week. Friday. On Friday, I've been with my wife for 18 years. So I'm like, well, she's stuck with me now, and I don't worry about that kind of thing as much anymore. But it's not, but it does. I think like I was saying about targeted ads. I started getting the ones for hair loss. We get hair loss ads come through. You get Newman ads, anything ads. But they're the ones that will come up. I'm not sure if you've had these yet, Sam, but I bet Rob has. Life insurance. Remind you, you're getting old. You're probably going to die soon. You better take cover out in case that happens. Like you turn 30, then these things start to happen overnight. It's gone from cool, nerdy video game stuff to, well, you're getting old, Sam. Time to get ready for death now. You're in your 30s, and it's not true. I'm 30s, mid to late 30s, but like you don't. But that's what you're seeing. If you spend a lot of time on social media, you're going to see these things. They're going to make you think, well, this is. And even if you have a targeted ad, I think that makes it harder sometimes, because I know I'm being targeted because of my age, and that does make you think, oh, like, okay, is that I mean that this is the end of the glory days, if you will.
I think I feel you're almost too knowledgeable for your own good at that point, because you know it's a targeted ad.
Yes, exactly.
If you could be blissfully ignorant that, oh yeah, that's just an ad that everyone gets,
Yeah.
it's fine,
Yeah.
then it'd be fine. And I guess that's the difference now between like social media and, say, you know, 10 or 15 years ago when it was just TV adverts where everyone got the same adverts. Now we're getting picked apart by our Google searches or our adverts or whatever else. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. I've never even thought about that, but I think just to kind of wind down, I don't know how it's gone so quickly, but we kind of winded down a little bit. But one thing I wanted to ask you kind of already touched on it a little bit there, and I'm wondering, because it seemed a bit opposite of what I was thinking. I brought it up to you both before we started recording. It's this idea of, like, for me personally, my self-esteem issues have now gone from physical base. There's still a level of physical insecurities and whatever else, but I'm kind of a little bit more comfortable in that, I guess is the word I would use. And now I'm starting to move into more insecurities around personality-based things, whether it is a mental health thing or whether it is just a, you know, just feeling like you're irritating to friends, or your friends aren't talking to you as much. And maybe that's just at this stage of my life, and then it changes again as I get older again. But I don't know what experience of that, where it's like that almost personality-based insecurities and self-esteem and whatever else that can be drawn upon.
And I think that changes. There's always something to be insecure about. Let's be right. There's always something to be insecure about. But I think, again, when I got to my mid-30s, I honestly stopped caring what people think about me generally. I'm kind of think, so like, you always think that, you know, if someone doesn't like something about me, then I don't personally hold that. I'm just like, well, whatever, you know. But I kind of think that you do move through phases. You do go through that phase, especially being young and a teenager and growing up, especially going through things like puberty. You might see people develop quicker than you and start to get muscle mass, and their testosterone's raging when yours isn't, and you feel behind. And that is going to make you feel smaller and less than. And then I think, again, for me, when you're in your 20s, you kind of figured out who you are, but you want people to like who you are. You want to make sure that the decisions you made on the man you're going to be are going to be right for your social group and your social status and this kind of thing. And then when you get a bit older again, it's right back down to the body, and not really caring what people think. Well, that's at least how it's been for me. I think especially over lockdown, and I said at the start of this, I put on a fair few stone, and that did rock my body confidence, which did lower my self-esteem a bit, but I just felt like I had to do something about it. But yeah, I think there's always going to be something to worry about. There's always going to be a reason to put yourself down. You're always going to find something, and that's going to change depending on the stage of life you're in.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so I found, it's shifted for me. When I was younger, it was kind of physical appearance, and then that disappeared for a while, and then obviously that's kind of cropping up with me a bit again now, because again, targeted ads and, you know, and hitting a significant milestone in a few months. What I found, I don't know, I guess for me personally, I think it does depend what I've got going on in my life, and kind of big kind of upheavals or changes in my life tend to kind of trigger different kind of areas for me. I think I mentioned about, when I was younger, I really kind of, the lack of money, you know, or my job situation really hit me hard. That's kind of changed. And that's not something that I tend to write. That's not something that I tend to worry about anymore. I think it can depend what's going on. Yeah, maybe what's going on in your life at different times. Something I did notice again recently was that after a recent breakup, that kind of hit my self-esteem, and because again it's a change and I'm adjusting to seeing myself in a different way. So I think maybe that can, I think for me, maybe one of the biggest things that I found personally, it's what you've got going on in life that how these various things that big changes, if you've got used to seeing yourself a certain way for a while and then get comfortable with it, and then something happens, something changes. So that kind of readjustment, that can up you, whether that's, approaching another significant birthday, whether it's a change in your job status or your relationship status, which can also then affect how you can relate to other people around you. But I think I'd agree with that. I find there's probably always something there that has potential, and I think everyone struggles with their self-esteem at some points. But I think it's maybe good to be aware that if you do have an underlying mental health difficulty, such as anxiety, depression, just being aware of what can impact on that, because I think that just heightens it. I'm not saying if I didn't have depression or anxiety and that I would not struggle, that I would be absolutely fine, because that's dishonest. Everyone has struggles with their self-esteem at some point, but just be aware that these kind of things can heighten it and kind of make and impact it, because obviously mental health difficulties, conditions, they kind of have that habit of skewing how you see things and almost distorting your view of the world and yourself.
Yeah, and just back to that, I think what Rob says is right, that there's always been times when you are going to question your esteem and your self-belief, and made me think we're on the cusp of a new FIFA cycle starting again soon. You'll see online on Twitter, there'll be lads worrying about their FIFA Ultimate Team because they're not as good as they've not got enough coins to get Mbappe or Ronaldo in their team, so they're not going to be as good in the weekend league. And people tie their whole self-esteem up into these external things now as well, which is serious. It's not. I don't want to make light of it, even though, like I said, out of context, like it does sound quite humorous that people worry about their ultimate team on their video games, but it does has a real serious impact on people's self-esteem. Gets tied into these things which might be important to someone in the short term, but it's not the. But that's how the world we're in. This is how this capitalist world we're in is almost designed around, is to make you have this fear of missing out. If you don't have A, B, and C, then you're worthless and you fail. That's how people feel.
And I think it's worth, and I think this is maybe again a habit that men fall into a little bit more than women, is this tying your self-worth to something external because you can't express it in any other way. Whether it be, again, why do men get so wound up by their football team losing when they've had absolutely no impact on that whatsoever? Like, it's nothing to do with you. No. You're not on the pitch. You can't do anything about this. There's no decisions you've made apart from one you made like 20 odd years ago when you were a kid and you decided to go to Charlton instead of sticking it out with Chelsea or something. I don't know. Just my own personal trauma coming out there. But it is that thing of like, we do really tie self-worth into these external identity things. Again, women do it to a certain extent as well, but I think men certainly do it a lot worse. And again, whether it's you used to say your score on a video game, or it's your football team, whether it's again, and even when talking about all this. The monetary values and stuff like this, whether it's the car, whether it's the house, these are all external factors. Obviously, there's some that are very kind of real and very, impactful in terms of actually paying your bills and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of like having the nicest car, having the nicest house, that's all very external as well. So it's just an interesting point you make there, and if that is also part of what ties into specifically men's self-esteem issues, when we do tie it to this kind of ever-moving and thing we have very little control over factor in our life. Yeah,
I think that's it. I think especially men want to feel part of something. They want to feel part of something bigger, part of something more than just them. And it means that people do put a lot of their personality and their goals into these external things. I don't know, I'm sure you saw on Twitter over the weekend, people stress about their fantasy football team at the moment. It's the start of the season, so people are actually getting annoyed and getting quite stressed over not making certain changes before the weekend come. and it's such an important thing to feel part of that, to feel part of this world, that you claw onto something external, but then that becomes part of people wrap that up their personality and their self-worth, which it was quite dangerous. It's not but people and I will do it. I'm not saying that like none of us probably do things all like well-being wise, because we all work in the industry, that we know exactly what we're doing to keep ourselves well, because we probably don't. Let's be honest, we're lads as well, so we all fall into the same traps.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying. I think that is actually worth saying, because you might, if you're listening to this podcast and you've listened to us for the last kind of year and a half that we've been on, and you look at us and think, oh God, they're like they've got it all figured out. Not even close. Like not in the slightest. Like I've had in a number of times in the last couple of months, I've had really down times where I've really struggled with everything. And it doesn't matter how much I sound like I know what I'm talking about on here. Applying that to myself is a very different thing. It goes back to what we were saying earlier on in the podcast about what you tell your mates versus what you tell yourself. I could give anyone any amount of advice all day long from my own personal experiences or what I know and what I've researched and everything like that. But I'm never going to give myself, I can start to work on giving myself the same kindness, but I'm not ever going to give myself the exact same kindness as I give my mates, because it's just not the way my brain is wired, and it's not the way. I don't think it's a natural thing for a lot of us to do, to be honest, is give ourselves the same kindness as we give a lot of our friends and our family.
You're right.
I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the podcast. So thank you very much for joining us.
Seems like a good way to leave things off, didn't it?
Yeah, I do like to try and figure out where we can end it nicely. But again, like I said at the top, if anyone has experienced any other, if anything that we spoke about this podcast does relate to you, please give us the Solent Mind support line a call, and I'll be able to give you bite-sized wellbeing advice, and also refer you to any other services we have, whether it's in Solent Mind or locally, that are also available to you. If you're in Portsmouth and you need some help in the evening, please call the Habour. That's for Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport, Havant and East Hampshire. And then if you're in Southampton, you can call the Lighthouse. Again, that is also in the evening, and that is an out-of-hours crisis service that is here for you whenever you need it. And all of that will be on the end card or in the description. So thank you very much to Dan and Rob for joining me. And we'll see you all next month for the next episode. Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.
Bye.
If you have been affected by any problems discussed in today's episode, please reach out to our services. If you're in Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport, Havant or East Hampshire, you can contact the Habour, open 4:30pm to 11pm every single evening. Just text or call 0741 364 911. If you're in the Southampton area, contact the Lighthouse, open 4:30pm to 11pm every evening. Text Lighthouse and your postcode to 074 5127 6010. And if you aren't in either of those areas, please contact the Solent Mind support line. Give them a call on 023 8017 9049 or contact the web chat on our website. They are open 10am to 2pm on weekends and bank holidays, and 9am to 7pm any other day. And they'll be able to let you know any services available in your area.